Right.
Hi everybody, we're the boys from Fascination Street. I am your co-host Mika Pearson
And
and your host Jimmy Pearson.
hello there. I know Mika forgot to put his phone on silent just before we went. Whoops, rookie error. So, how's your week been? You had a good week?
It's been an excellent week because there's one thing that I have loved the most.
Being off school.
Yes.
And
Oh,
what have you done with your week so far?
I have been hanging out with you.
Yep. Because I've been on
Um,
leave. So I've actually been at home
yeah,
to have some time with you at long last.
yeah.
So that's been pretty cool. What else have we been up to this week?
We've I've been hiking for most of the week, and if you don't know what hiking is, that means we go walking around the moats. Sorry, Dougie, did not mean to mention that in front of you.
Ears are up.
Okay.
Ears are up.
Anyway,
And where else have we been?
we have been to.
Shall I give you a get clue? It begins with castle.
Oh, Dover Castle! But that's a real big hint there.
Yep.
That's like the biggest hint I've ever had in my lifetime.
Oh, we had a great day there, didn't we? I think we were there, what, four,
6 hours.
we were there like 4 hours before we even kind of got up to the main keep itself. So we've
Mm.
done the secret underground castle, secret underground hospital tour that I haven't been to before. And then we done another tour after that. It was about an hour long, and it was the Operation Dynamo tour.
That was interesting.
That was really good, wasn't it?
Mm.
And then we went into the place afterwards and we got to play dress up. So most of you that follow me on Facebook would have seen the pictures of me dressed up as Admiral Bertram Ramsay, but with a more panache kind of twist. Mika, you got dressed up in your because we went to Mika's granddad's regimental museum as well. So they had loads of clothes for the kids to try on. So he got dressed up in his granddad's colours, which was a bit of a cute moment, to be
But
fair.
we forgot something.
What did we forget?
Our three producers. Yes,
Ah,
you heard me right. Three.
we
But
have.
there's supposed to be one.
Right, do you want to introduce the first one? Go on then. The first one is
Introducing Vader McVader Face.
4 foot of Darth Vader for a child of 4'11".
Oh, yeah.
Next
Half the
one.
size of me.
Next one.
Producer Sarah.
Evening, guys.
And then the one and only Trooper McTrooper Face.
Trooper McTroop face. There he is in all
Oh,
his glory. All
yeah.
4 foot of him. Yes.
Majestic.
Majestic. Like the eagle swooping above the mountain.
And they do talk.
Right.
They do talk.
Now, do you want to tell everyone why we've been joined by Vader McVader face and Troopy McTroop face?
Because of Star Wars Celebration.
That's right. Star Wars Celebration in Chicago this weekend. And we've been waiting for quite some time for this. And if you missed it last night,
The new Star Wars trailer came out.
and it was epic. It was so, so good.
If we could play it at any time, it'd probably be now. Because this is our favourite trailer.
It's pretty good. And if this trailer is anything to go by, the film should be spectacular. We broke it down. If you haven't watched it yet, leave the room now because we're going to mention a couple of things that were in it that we picked up on.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
So 3, 2, 1.
There was Kylo Ren.
Get out of it. Right. Okay. First thing that you noticed.
So I noticed that there was Rey standing there with the lightsaber that was basically demolished
Luke.
by them, by Kylo and Rey. But if you ever watched The Last Jedi, the ending of it, the kyber crystal got absolutely smashed and it was two parts.
That's it.
But weirdly, there was like no dents whatsoever. It was just there normally, but no kyber crystal can work without a crack. And there was a crack in it. So how did she get it working? Well, what I
Let's leave that one there. That's too far.
Oh.
Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, no, no, no. That's bad territory. The next thing I picked up on was the Death Star remains on an island
Yeah.
in the sea. Big waves, big moment, big. Oh, And I
as we heard.
and I believe it's the second Death Star, not the first one. So, and for you, the last bit.
Well, the last bit, that was, yeah, Dad, you're spoiling it.
That's what us parents do.
So basically, what you could hear, it all went blackout, and then you could hear the Emperor Palpatine's laugh. But what happened was what was it?
We were watching the panel. We were watching the live panel with all like J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Kennedy. Who else was there? John Boyega, Daisy Ridley, Oscar
BB-8,
Isaacs, R2D2,
BB-8,
Rose, Jonas, who plays Chewie, and the new lady. I can't remember her name. That's really bad. Jana. That's it.
Jana.
Done.
And also, we have a new BB-8. Another friend for him.
He has a new friend in this one, which goes along on the adventure with the guys. So
what's his name? It's BS, isn't it?
Dave.
BS.
Call it Dave. Everything's Dave. Anything that's trustworthy is a Dave.
Oh, what's that BB unit over there?
John has just asked, was that the Emperor? And it's the first Death Star.
Oh, is it the first Death Star? I would have said it was the second.
No.
But we're not going to get into that right now because we've got full
Lando's daughter.
Right. On the panel, did you watch the panel, John? Because there was something that alluded to it, that Lando had been around and there may be many children. When she said that, I had a feeling it may have been Finn, which would have been Lando's son. And I said that a long, long time ago.
No, he hasn't watched it. And the second one was on Endor.
Yeah, I know, but look at where it was. Endor also had an ocean. I think it was only like 8% of the planet, which was ocean. They were coming from a treed area. Just putting it out there. So we shall see, John. We shall see. But I hope everyone's as excited as what we are. And that was it. Also, we got another donation during the week through our new PayPal system that we have. So thank you so much to everyone that's donated. We do have a new video camera on the way.
But if you haven't donated, that's fine. Because we still love you.
Yeah, of course we do. We do the show for you. And if you donate, then that's just a Brucey bonus. Absolutely. Like that. Like that. Right, so tonight's show, what have we got? We have got our beginner's guide to ufology, and we have got our esteemed friend with us, Philip Mantle from Flying Disc Press. If you're here for the Art Bell thing, we'll be kicking that off in about 2 hours' time after we finish with Philip. But today is the first year passing of Art Bell. And as all of you know that know us, you'll know that he is the inspiration that we do what we do and why I want to be a broadcaster. So he's quite a big influence on everything that we've done so far and everything that I want to do in the future. So we're going to touch on that later, but without further ado, let's do the bio for Philip. So Philip Mantle is a long-standing UFO researcher and author from the UK. He was formerly the Director of Investigations for the British UFO Research Association and the MUFON representative for England. He is the founder of Flying Disc Press, and it can be found and contacted at flyingdiscpress.blogspot.co.uk, and Sarah has put the link in the description. So without further ado, Philip.
Good evening.
How are you? You okay?
I'm fine, thank you.
Are you a Star Wars fan?
Well, I mean, I go back to the original Star Wars, and I remember queuing around the block to get in to see it when it first came out. And I even have a friend that worked on Star Wars as well. He worked on the special edition. He was a special effects expert, and he went out to the States to work with George Lucas for a short while on Star Wars, the special edition.
That must have been a horrible job.
Well, you know, he said what was really funny about it was that where the Lucas Ranch is, it's supposed to be kind of out of the way and nobody knows about it. Yeah. But when you got there, there was a gift shop. So
how does that work?
I don't know. So obviously people did know where it was, you know. But it was just one of many films he worked on, but it's a nice thing to have on your CV, I would think.
Yeah, so that's why people turning up at Area 150, Area 51 gate, isn't it? Can we get a T-shirt, or can we get like a small Zeta or something like that?
Maybe they're missing out on that. Maybe there's a new line for you, Jimmy.
I'm just sticking to making my new little T-shirts, which I made this week.
We can sell them at Area 51. I'll see you there, mate.
We'll get your books there with us as well. Right, so Phil, what is ufology?
Well, that's a good question. You know, there's either a long answer or a short answer, but I'll go for the short one. No, I'll stick to the short one. Basically, it's the research, investigation, and study of what has become known as the UFO phenomenon. And so to sort of compress that and make it acceptable, it is being labeled ufology. It's always nice to have an ology of something, isn't it? So it gives the subject a respectable sounding name, if nothing else. But it's just condensing it all, really.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you first get involved in ufology?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to when I was a teenager, slightly older than Mika, but I was at high school. But I'd always been interested in the paranormal. And for example, my best friend's grandmother lived literally the opposite side of the street, and I used to go to the spiritualist church with her. So I was always interested in it. And then I read one book, I was interested in astronomy as well. And this particular book, I've no idea what it was called now. It had one chapter on UFOs, basically dismissing it, you know, saying what a lot of nonsense it was. But I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. Then, of course, the Steven Spielberg film Close Encounters came out, so that certainly helped. And by this time, I'd left school. You know, I was working, and in 1979, I went to work in Germany for a short while, and couldn't speak the language, so I couldn't sit down and watch the TV. But so I got a few books. My mum sent me some books, actually, and some of them were about UFOs, and that cemented my interest. Now, when I came back home, my aunt brought a local newspaper from Leeds, the Yorkshire Evening Post, and in it was an advertisement for the newly formed Yorkshire UFO Society that was staging its first meeting in Leeds that Sunday. So off I went. No internet in those days, Mika. There was a time before the internet. It did exist.
No!
And I found the location where they were hosting this meeting. And the Yorkshire UFO Society was formed by Graham and Mark Birdsall, two brothers. Graham went on some years later to publish UFO magazine, and he was the editor of it as well. So that's where it all began for me. And, you know, and I just felt at home, Jim. You know, Graham and Mark put on a presentation, and I was absolutely riveted. And that was it. I was hooked. I felt this is the place for me. And there you go. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's really strange because, like, I mean, nowadays it's really difficult to find all of those kind of small, like, old spiritualist church kind of communities when things like which it used to be back when. I mean, but nowadays you think you've got like massive conferences. You know, you've got so many like online groups where you can meet and you can talk. I mean, when we first come into it, I mean, we tried on Facebook for a little while, and it wasn't that great for finding like decent ufologists or following different news. As soon as we got onto Twitter, it was just like from day one, just bam. You know, I met like a few of the guys that are now in the unidentified, a few other people along the way, and they've been with us the whole time. And it's just such a big, beautiful community with such a vast array of characters.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when I joined, there were lots of regional UFO groups, but there were also national ones as well. So you were never that far from, you know, if you wanted to get involved. And a lot of these little groups, of course, used to produce their own publications, their own little newsletter, and their own little magazine. And we did exactly that. We produced the UFOS Journal. And I think we printed on a hand Gestetner printer, you know, all by hand. Yeah. I think we produced about 30 copies, you know what I mean? And then a few years down the line, we advanced to a proper printing machine. Now, our HQ in Leeds was in Mark Birdslow's flat, and that was on the 7th floor. Now, this printing machine was the size of a big washing machine, if not bigger. And of course, we were praying that when we got it there, that the lifts were working, you know. And not only that, when we did get it, we didn't know how to work it, didn't know what to do, but Mark figured it out. And of course, he was on the 7th floor, and we then printed a publication called Quest. And we got a knock on the door one night, and there was a rather large and hairy gentleman stood there who lived in the flat underneath. And of course, the printing machine had been going, and he was, how can we put it? He was not best pleased with the noise we were making. So the way we placated him was to tell him we were printing the local parish magazine for the local church. So then what we had to do was lift this printing press up, put all kinds of things underneath it to stop the vibrations going through the floor and having this gentleman knocking on your door again. But, you know, there were fun days, and we used to hand collate it, put it together. And I've still got copies of them here now, you know. They were happy times. And of course, that then translated and became the newsstand magazine, UFO magazine that Graham and Mark published and Graham edited. And that sold in huge quantities around the world. So it started with the UFOS journal in about 1980 with 20 or 30 copies, went all the way through to a newsstand magazine, UFO magazine, that sold 40, 50,000 copies. So it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
That is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So during your time as a UFO investigator as well, because obviously you've probably done your fair share of field work in your time as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I was fortunate, first and foremost, meeting Mark and Graham, because they'd already been at it a few years. And then I was fortunate enough again that in the early and right the way through, but certainly the early to the mid 1980s, areas in and around, I live in West Yorkshire, but areas in and around North Yorkshire, around the market town of Skipton in the Yorkshire Dales, were literally haunted by UFOs. And most of the reports came our way, one way or another. We were fortunate that one of the sort of members of the group was Police Sergeant Tony Dodd, who lived in Grassington in North Yorkshire, had his own sightings. So a lot of things would fall on, you know, on Tony's desk, either officially as a police officer or unofficially. And it seemed to come our way. So I just fell into it at the right place at the right time. So if that's what you were looking to do, get involved in UFO investigation, that was the place to be. So just very fortunate, really.
That's fantastic. I mean, how many investigations do you think you've been on?
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't count. And I've lost count. I mean, I've got a thing next to me. This is a metal filing cabinet, and it's packed full of old reports and old sightings. And I've got boxes behind me as well with stuff in, because the filing cabinet's full. Because this was all paper-based. There was no internet. And it always used to amaze us how people actually found us, because we weren't in the telephone directory. You know, we couldn't call Ghostbusters, you know. Yeah. And it's one of the things we did when people contacted us, say, how have you found out about us? So we'd replicate it, you know.
Sorry, mate, you broke us on that one.
You know, Ghostbusters.
Well, Ghostbusters, who are you going to call?
Yeah, exactly.
FBI.
Ghostbusters. So we used to have little leaflets printed, and we'd hand them out. We'd put them in, you know, libraries and police departments, all over the place. So our name and telephone number filtered through places, and it never ceased to amaze us how people got in touch. It didn't. And then, of course, I moved on from there and became part of BUFORA, the British UFO Research Association, which was a national organisation. And at its height, when I was their director of investigation, we had like 1,000 members, and about 10% of those members volunteered to be, you know, on-site investigators, and they were all over the UK. So sightings would again come our way from all over the place. And if they were in Kent, well, I'd pick out the guy in Kent and pass them on to him. So, you know, and any local stuff I'd deal with myself, with other colleagues, of course. So there was always something going on. You know, it never stopped, Jimmy. It still hasn't really.
Yeah. I mean, we've tried looking around to see if we can find anything like in our local area as well. We can't seem to find anything, even online. Like UFO groups and stuff like that.
Well, that's it. I mean, I think the internet has seen the end of a lot of UFO groups, including Bufora. I mean, it still exists in name only, but they don't have a membership as such. And one of the things I used to do as the director at Bufora would actually go around the country meeting these local UFO groups and say, look, can we cooperate? You know, if we get something in and we don't have someone in this area, can I pass it on to you? Well, you know, all we ask for is a copy of your finished report. And that seemed to work very well. And it was a great place for learning about the subject. We're talking about the beginner's guide here. You know, the local UFO groups were a great place to start. And there still are some, and there's some online ones as well. You know, but obviously the internet has changed everything. It really has. But, you know, I used to love the little local UFO groups, and I did talks at many of them up and down the place, you know. And they thought when I was part of Bufora that we were some kind of monster trying to take them all over. But you know, that certainly wasn't the case. Just cooperation, that was all.
Yeah, of course. Now, see, that segued into where I was going next. So, with all of this going on, everything's so national nowadays, what would you recommend to like young people or new people when they're getting into ufology? Where would you think would be the best place for them to go first?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would suggest to start and see if there is a local UFO group, because there still are some scattered around the country, and they're always a good port of call. And study it as well. You study it like you would study any other subject. You know, how do you learn about it? Well, you read about it. You watch things online. You know, documentaries, and but there also is, like with Bufora, you don't have to be a member, but they also run an investigators training course, and it's done in the post, and it's not a pass or fail. It's just learning you the basics. You know, and there's certain modules to it. It was originally started by Jenny Randalls, who was my predecessor at Bufora. It kind of faded off a little bit. Then when I took over, I reinstated it and updated it a bit, and it's still now run with Bufora. You pay a small fee for it, but it's more of just like a copy and an administration fee. They don't make any profit out of it, so it's a good way to start. Is that it really is. And you learn the basics. It's like when I joined the Yorkshire UFO Society, one of the things that Graham and Mark sort of made us do was to know our locality, know where your airport is there a helicopter port, and things like this, because you know that you'll get sightings come in that can be easily explained. So if you have a basic knowledge and a basic knowledge of astronomy and things like that, you know, you're off to a good start. So I would recommend Bufora's training course. Again, it's not a pass or fail. It is just learning you the ropes. So that's always a good place to start.
Would that be bufora.co.uk?
That's the one. Yeah.
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 So you put that out for us. Yeah, I mean, we were looking at something a little while ago, and it was saying that like sightings have decreased, but
they haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they have. I mean, how does it kind of like feel from your
Well,
perspective?
again, I'm not so sure they've decreased. I think the way that people report the sightings has just changed, because now it's done online, and it doesn't get into the news as much, and it's not in the media. So I don't know where they take their readings from, and obviously there isn't the UFO groups anymore, and of course the Ministry of Defence every year used to issue a memo, if you like, of how many UFO sightings they'd had. Yep. And of course, they no longer allegedly officially investigate UFOs anymore. So that's not available. So when they say UFO sightings have decreased, I'm not sure where they get the statistics from.
Just not being reported as openly as they were before.
Absolutely, because you've got lots of online groups and organizations, and the sightings go to them, and they'll maybe compile them at the end of the year, but they have no membership as such. they don't have an arm to publish them. I know there's a guy in Canada, for example. He still runs an investigation team, and he publishes at the end of the year all their statistics. And he's not convinced that sightings have fallen off, but they do go in peaks and troughs anyway. So, Jim, I've heard down the years, and I've been at it 40 years now. That's 2/3 of my life. I'm 60,
Yeah.
And the amount of times I've heard during those 40 years that UFOs are dead,
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, it's nonsense.
Right. Okay. Quick one. Quick response. Are the MOD still investigating them? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course they are.
Why don't they decreases?
No, I mean, I think if anything, I mean, all right, maybe people aren't, because people don't know where to report them. People,
Well,
whereas
exactly.
beforehand, people would probably phone the police, or they'd phone their local air base or their local army garrison or something like that. Where would you report it, Phil?
Well, that's it. I mean, you still can, if it's something out of the ordinary, you still can report it to your local police. But it's like wherever you report it to, it's already gone. So they're only going to document it like anywhere else. And of course, the police would then forward it on to what's called Air Staff 2A at the Ministry of Defence. They no longer investigate sightings. Well, they never did investigate them, really. But, but they did say once they'd handed all their files over to the National Archives that they would still sort of, it's almost like a politician's answer. They'd still look at certain incidents should it be deemed necessary. So they may look at, rather than from Joe Public, they may be looking at sightings from the military, from the police, from official locations, should I say. So I think it would be wrong to say they've given it up completely, but as far as Joe Public's concerned, maybe. But we'll see, won't we? We'll see.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Right, so for the new people, excuse me, that's getting into ufology, what type of thing would you carry in one of your investigation kits? If you were going out on an investigation one evening, or going out for a sky watch or anything like, was there any certain kit that you would always carry with you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I used to have a kit bag always on standby, and in that bag I used to do a bit of amateur photography, so my camera was always in there with plenty of film. Film, what's that these days? Film. Mika's looking and saying, well, film?
I know.
How old is this man?
To me the other day, he said, Dad, when you were younger and everything was in black and white? I was like, what? You, my boy, you're going to take 10 of the best, son.
Well, true, everything was black and white then.
Black and white.
Was.
But I had a kit bag
black and then
with my camera, and also a tape recorder, cassette tape, and plenty of batteries, and a notebook and pen. As simple as that. And I would literally just chuck that in the car. I knew everything that was in there was what I needed, so I didn't have to look for anything. And I still have my old 35mm camera and all its accessories. Don't use it anymore, of course, because you've got a better camera in your back pocket on your mobile phone, probably.
Yeah.
But that's what, so it's the basics, something to record events with. Film, it's now digital. I've got a digital recorder here myself now. Not sure how to use it very well, but I've got one. I still have an old cassette recorder as well. And
nothing wrong with that. I've got one on my stereo.
Yeah, and a pad and pen. Simple things like that. And away you go. What more do you need?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would still have the camera if I were you, because any electrical that is around a UFO could either get hacked, or there is lots of what is it?
Interference,
and also 010101
the binary code.
So if I would you, I would always have a camera on standby.
Yeah, but I do have my old 35mm camera, and there's no batteries in it. I can wind it on with my thumb if I want to. Yeah, I'm not sure where to take the film for developing anymore. Like, you put it in at your local shop.
Boots still do it. Boots still do it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they definitely do it. We know someone who processes them at Boots in Dover. Big shout out, Neil. Hello, mate. So yeah, see, and now that segues me onto my next one.
Yeah.
UFO pictures. Why are they always so blurry?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, if you think about it, you know, in the last 20 years or so, your camera that you have has become available to almost everyone, and you carry it in your pocket. It's on your mobile phone. And then the quality of the cameras have got better, and it's one of the selling points, isn't it? It's not just a phone anymore. You go online, take fantastic pictures, you can do all this. But I still think it's when it comes to UFOs, it's the unexpected aspect of it, because it's the last thing usually on anybody's mind. And click, it's gone. And still today, like there has always been, people had a camera with them and they said, I never thought to use it. I never thought to use it. I just stood there, in amazement. And by the time I thought, it's gone.
Sorry, Phil, carry on. Mate.
Yeah, just when they sort of realized what was happening, it's too late, it's too far away, it's gone. They waved the camera around in the air, which is no good taking a picture of anything, Yeah. But you have to think what today's modern cameras are designed to do. They're not designed for things like that, even though they may have great resolution on them. Pretty much designed for things just sort of local, selfies and, that kind of stuff.
Selfies.
Yeah.
Oh.
But you know what I mean?
You do them all the time.
Well, we did. I mean, when we had our sighting last year, our first one, I mean, that was like really late at night. And I mean, even if I'd got my phone out of my pocket and taken a picture of it, all you would have seen is just a speck in the sky.
Well, that's
it.
Yeah, that's it. So
the second sighting I had, luckily enough, that was bright enough. I managed to like video call Sarah and share it with her as well.
You're talking about a power up.
Yeah, the power up one. That was done.
I've only had one experience, and it was okay, but it wasn't a particular one I wanted at this age.
You actually want to see something, not
not something in my dream.
Well, we're kind of hoping that we'll see a lot more of them this year, because we always like to get out in sort of like August time for the Perseid shower.
Absolutely. I've been out on the moors at night and seen that, and it's spectacular. We actually tried to record how many we were seeing, and we gave it up in the end because there were that many,
It's when they turn around and say it's 100 an hour. Oh, really? Well, where are you getting that from? I mean, the last ones that we had here, there was a lot more than 100 an hour.
Absolutely. It just depends on the clarity of wherever you are. I was out on the moors, not a light in sight, total pitch black, and it was a fantastic night sky, and I was very lucky. Very lucky.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah. So
whereas, us down here on the English Riviera, on the Kent coast, we've got light pollution galore. So.
Well, I'm the same. I live in sunny Pontefract in West Yorkshire. It's so those days have gone for me. But I mean, it's good to get out in a sky watch anyway, because you become aware of what is in the night sky that is natural. And obviously in August there's the Perseid shower. If you're a UFO investigator, you may get a few people contacting you saying, I've seen these strange flashes of lights in the sky. You say, well, you'll then know exactly what it is. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, it's something we've always done. We've always had family evenings out in the garden and things like that, because we love just looking at the stars which is kind of a bit where, I would have expected all the years that we'd done it as a family, that there would have been other bits and pieces we'd seen. But
can you remember that time where I thought I actually saw a UFO?
What was it?
It was a planet, wasn't it? I cannot believe that. All that time I was looking, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's a planet.
Look, Dad, look.
No, not a planet, a UFO. And I was like, oh, I found my first UFO. And Dad got his staff thing, and I was just like, look, you see it's a UFO? And he says, no, that's a planet.
Was it Venus?
The thing is nowadays with the apps on your phone, they're so clever.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, Sarah brought me one going back a couple of years now, and it's called Starwalk 2. Sorry to plug it, but you can get it on the Android App Store. And
it's quite big.
To get the full pack, it's only like £2 or something. But once you've got it, It's great. You can point at anything in the sky. You can push the buttons. It will give you information on everything that's there. If you go to different planets, it will tell you the main satellites that are circling the planet and stuff like that. It's an amazing app. It really, really is.
Well,
I
I'll
think,
I'll give you an example of what we used to do. I mean, we had
yeah,
a sighting one day over Lancashire way, very early morning, and it was by an ambulance crew. And we got the details, and I went to a friend of mine in Halifax, and he had a ZX Spectrum computer with an
Yes.
astronomy program. And he put the details into there. I think it took like about 3 hours before we got the results or something like that. And it was a bright star in the end. But, you know, there was none of this instant stuff, you know.
yeah.
And so that's how it worked in those days. It took us a few hours to find that it was we kind of assumed what it was, but this astronomy program found it in about 3 hours for us.
Brilliant. You got to love the spectrums. I've actually got sat over there. My mum brought it for me a couple of Christmases ago. It's actually the Sinclair Spectrum games console,
Right.
because it's a lot easier than sitting down with your tape player for like 15 hours waiting for a game to load and then get like nearly there, like 97%, and then the tape stops or chews up, right? So yeah, my mum got me one of those and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But it illustrates how far we've sort of like come on with regards to sort of like the whole ufology situation. I mean, how do you feel about where we are with it at the moment? I mean, with so much that's going on within the community, whether it be at home or whether it be over in the US, I mean, there's a lot of turmoil. Is there, isn't there? Is it going to happen? Isn't it going to happen? I mean, I'm sure you've seen it a million and one times during the time that you've spent doing ufology. But where do you think we are at the moment with regards to
I think we're in a pretty
ufology?
good place. I think the subject's on the up. And again, it does go in peaks and troughs. And there's usually reasons for that. I think not last Christmas, but just before the Christmas before, there was the article in the New York Times about the secret Department of Defense UFO study.
Yeah.
Now, the New York Times historically have been very, very negative towards the subject. So for them to even consider something like this in the first place was remarkable. But then to print a very, very positive article. And of course, that has continued. And I think it's coming out, it might be this month, but it's either this month or next month. The people behind that have got a new TV series with the History Channel.
May 31st.
Well, there you go. And it was coming out shortly. So I'm expecting more from that study to come out in the TV series. It would have been nice if it had come out in you know, sort of free, but it's coming out in the TV series anyway. And of course, the guy behind it, Luis Elizondo, has spoken in public several times. And one of the things he said was, pointing to the audience, you were right. All this time you've been right. UFOs are real. You know, and so I'm looking forward to that. I think there's more to come from that gentleman. And what it does, of course, it gives the subject matter an air of credibility. And it's like you got a time going back a few years when the late Dr. John Mack, Harvard professor, a Pulitzer Prize winning author, stepped into the frame investigating the abduction phenomena. Then you had Nick Pope from the Ministry of Defense. You know, he was the man from the ministry. He did work on the UFO part of it for 3 years. And I know that because I was one of those that pestered the living daylights out of him when he was doing that job, you know, and I still have some of his correspondence to prove that. But again, whatever your thoughts about Nick, he was at that point the man from the ministry, but coming out in a very positive way and supporting the ongoing research into the phenomenon. So when people like that get involved, Jim, it just gives the subject matter an air of credibility. You're now getting little articles from scientists saying, perhaps we should have another look and treat it a bit more seriously than we have done before. So I think it's on the up. The subject's on the up, and we shall see.
Yeah, I mean, there's been many that have sort of like put it out there that we're going to hear something major this year, whether it be from other groups, whether or not it be from people like Grant Cameron, whether it you know, that some, you know, there is going to be a game-changing moment coming up soon.
Well, I think that's
Right.
already. I think that's already happened. I think with what happened with the Department of Defense study was a game-changing moment. But this thing, they call it disclosure now. You know, they're wanting official disclosure. Well, you know, I don't take an awful lot of notice of that, to be honest, Jim, because it's something that circulates every few years, and it just gets a different name every time it comes around. It used to be called Operation Right to Know, and there was people outside the White House with banners, you know, protesting. So, and they thought something's coming, something big is coming. When I first got involved, there was a well-known author in the UK. I won't mention his name. And this goes back to about 1980. It's coming. We're going to get all the answers now. And of course, you know, it never happened. So it does go around. But I think things like that was in the New York Times is part of it. It's maybe not coming. Maybe it's already here. But rather than it being a big announcement, you get it bit by bit, and you don't realize it as much then, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like when you look back at sort of like, you know, 2001, the press club and stuff like that, I mean, that was like deemed as one of the most monumentous moments for us per se.
Yeah.
But then that died a nasty death. No pun intended on that at all. But, you know, there was a lot of people that kind of thought once those hearings and bits and pieces were underway that we were going to be onto something big and something really, really great. And then nothing really happened from that, did it? It just got people talking again. Whereas I think, you know, this thing that TTSA have done have really, really, really put it on the map. And anyone watching that's known me for more than a year knows that I have been the biggest TTSA skeptic on the planet. However, it all started with the botched bits all to begin with. The Mylar balloon, you know, the way that Tom DeLonge got absolutely like just obliterated on the Joe Rogan show. And, you know, a few other little bits and bits where pieces like with the name, the cock up, the other bits and pieces that came out from John Greenwald at the Black Vault over the name and other bits. And it has been to a degree a comedy of errors. However,
there's a however.
However, again, there is another however. I did put the other however in a bit too early, so I'm sorry to have got everyone sat on the corner of the seat. However, I do believe that if anything is going to come from anything, these guys are the guys that are now going to push the narrative, because a bit like the political system in the UK, there's nothing else there. There's nothing there at all. And if you've got one person that's going to come out and make a difference or be against it or whatever, I think they're the guys that are going to bring it to the table and really start getting it talked about.
Yeah, I mean, they did make some mistakes. And I think, you know, with Tom, it was a bit naive, perhaps, you know, been there and done that. But I just said, you know, give them a chance. Don't dismiss them out of hand. Give them a chance. Let's see what happens. And I again, a colleague that is very close to them just more or less said the same thing. I think he knows more than he's letting on. But just be calm, Philip. Just give him a chance and let's see what happens. And you know, it's in a lot of spheres of influence, Jim. It's not always what you know; it's who you know.
Exactly.
You know, and it wouldn't surprise me that a rock star with a bucket load of money could make inroads into areas of officialdom, whereas perhaps your upfront, you know, UFO researcher is unable to do that because can you trust him? You know?
Well, yeah, but again, I mean, you can say, can you trust him? But at the same time, can you trust the people around him? Because obviously, where they were at that time doing what they'd done, they're secrets men. Secondly, you've also got the fact that Tom DeLonge used to have that relationship with Dr. Guerrero as well.
Yeah, so I would still say give them a chance. Let's see what the TV series is like. Let's see if there's anything new, anything groundbreaking, and if not, then they'll get rightfully criticised for it. I mean, whatever they do, Jim, there'll be one lot will criticise them and another lot will praise them. So you know, you can't really win. They're already getting criticised because it's coming out in a television programme. I said, well, look, you can go and stand at a conference where there's 200 or 300 people there and announce it there, or you can go on a national television program where you've got the likelihood of hundreds of thousands or possibly even millions of people seeing it. Which would you take? Which option would you take?
Yeah, of course. That's a no-brainer, right? I mean,
but bearing in
just
mind, Luis Elizondo has already spoken at some UFO events.
Yeah.
You know, so
it was what MUFON symposium was it last year?
Yeah, it was in Italy as well. Been in Italy, and he's done another one somewhere. And again, he's made a couple of errors, but then he's human after all, you know.
That's the point I wanted to try and make before we shifted on. We are human. We make errors no matter what. So whether or not they were secrets men beforehand or anything like that, there is going to always be room for human error. And if they can get it out there, as I say, no one else has picked up the ball, run with it, and got people talking about it as much as what these guys have. So, all right, you're going to have a few errors along the way. People are always going to have an eye on them. But they're only human. They make mistakes. And if they can get everyone on more of a better keel, talking about it even more, then as far as I'm concerned, that's job done, right?
Absolutely. And the thing about, you know, a TV series, it brings it into everybody's front room. You know, whether you like it or not, you know, it's going to be there and it's in your face. You know,
I mean, look how everyone lapped up Blue Book.
Well, you know, it had its critics because they wanted it to be just like the real thing. But if it was just like the real thing, it would have been a documentary. It's not a documentary. It's a drama series. When I say loosely based on real life. But what it does, again, it's what I've tried to argue is that the fictionalized side of things can support the serious side of things. One can feed the other, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like the X-Files, you know, when it was at its height, it brought the paranormal into everybody's living room around the world. It's like when Jurassic Park came out. How many people joined, you know, a local club, you know, to dig up fossils and what have you? Millions. I think even, you know, Attenborough he was sort of president of some society or other that the kids could join, you know. And I even spoke to a parapsychologist who has a PhD, and he got involved in the paranormal research when he first watched Ghostbusters. That's what got him interested, you know.
But that's it. We need to have that feeding our children as well, because like for me, growing up as a child of the 80s, again, mentioned this a million and one times on the show. I must sound like a broken old record by now. The age of sci-fi. I mean, we had it all there. We had E.T., we had the Star Trek movies, we had all the Star Wars movies. We had such a plethora of sci-fi back when. And it's just something that the kids don't have nowadays to get.
Because the kids don't understand nowadays because they're just like, well, I don't understand this, don't understand that. Well, how about you research? That's the real good word.
I mean, we sit and we watch bits and pieces together. I mean,
exactly.
What did you make of the first episode of Blue Book?
I didn't understand it because it was basically like, basically a guy that was racing after a Foo Fighter. And was he in a Foo Fighter?
No. He was in I think it was a P-51, wasn't it?
And he was after a UFO. Let's just say that.
Yep.
And he made the wrong decision to do. That's the number one rule. Do not interact with it. Do not shoot it. But he had the guts to shoot the thing. Mm. You shouldn't do that because you'll make it more angry, and they're just like, how about I interact with that?
Yeah.
See how they like it. And they'll break the whole shit and they'll go, well, I'm gone now.
You struggled with the introduction of Dr. Hynek, didn't you? Who he was, the scientist guy. You struggled with that one, didn't you?
Yeah.
When he turned up, who is he? What is he doing? You know, but, you know, again, if To the Stars are bringing it to the younger audience, which they're planning to do, again, it can't be that bad.
No, because if you look at their portfolio, you know, they're openly saying it is a research and entertainment company. You know, so there's going to be books, there's going to be television, there'll be something for the youngsters, there'll be a bit of everything. you know, and you can't fault that really.
No,
You know, I think that's a great way to look at it. I mean, I wrote a couple of little books for a younger audience many years back. Don't ask me what they were called. I can't remember now, but basically the publisher had published a couple. Well, they were in the process of publishing a couple of little books, and they sent me them to sort of read over to see what I made of them. And I said, well, there's a lot of errors in these. This is wrong. That's wrong. So they invited me down to London to correct them all. And I ended up writing the next couple in the series for them.
Wow.
And so, you know, if anything for a younger audience has to be applauded, really. I don't think there's enough of it.
Of course. I mean, that's, again, the main reason that we're doing this series that we're doing at the moment, so we can bring it to either a younger audience or a new audience. So, I mean, although I'd love to get into like some of the deeper stuff with you. I really, really would at some point. So maybe we'll do that in a Skype call during like another week or something. But like for us, you know, bringing it to like the table, what we think and stuff, you know, is really imperative. It really, really is.
Well, you know, the town where I used to live in Batley in West Yorkshire, I did a talk at the local boys' school, and the kids were amazing. And they were all Mika's age, you know, and they asked better questions than the adults did, you know, and they were amazing because this was done in their spare time. It wasn't in class time. So they had to volunteer their own time to come and listen to this. And I didn't know, but the headmaster was sat at the back, and I got a lovely letter from him afterwards, you know, but then again, I've gone and lectured at, you know, some very highbrow public schools. Where the fees were probably more than I was earning as a living, you know, and
gosh,
yeah, absolutely, gosh. So there was, you know, there's always an opening for a younger audience. There really is.
Yeah, I mean, what type of things do you think young people would? Because, you know, what would you think would be more appealing to like kids nowadays to get them interested in the subjects? I mean, you got into it realistically through astronomy, didn't you? Through coming out on Sky Watches with Mummy and Daddy, and
Well,
what do you think would be cool?
the one thing is that, in my opinion, for the kids that are new, I would suggest the first thing you should do to do what me and my dad are doing is Sky Watches, and then after that, if you've seen one, don't just like keep it in there and go, oh my gosh, I saw one. You've got to get in touch with someone, because if you don't, it's a more high risk.
And what else do you think would get children more into ufology? Do you think like decent kind of like stories aimed at children, as in like books?
Yeah.
Would that be
books,
a good thing?
And also research.
I think as far as books are concerned, is that for a younger audience, they certainly don't want too much data. You know, they don't want to be overloaded with it. They like the information, but in today's age, it's all instant, isn't it? It's instant info. So a book has to reflect that. It's to give them the basic bullet points of what's happened and when and where. Good graphics, because kids are used to it now with their computer games and online, and basic information. I mean, I planned a book years ago for a younger audience, although it never made it into print. And that's how we did like a potted history of ufology, the main cases, and at the back there was a list of organizations to contact and a few main websites. So, you know, but don't overload them. You know, of
course.
You know, we would sit down and read stuff, reams and reams and reams. But today, I just bought a new phone, and you know, I don't know if you flick it with it. What are you doing? Me doing push it? You know, I'm trying to press it. You know. So you have to understand how our younger audience interacts today, and that's it's instant information and not too much of it. And that's not disrespecting them. That's just the way that society is today, and they will learn from that, you know, and you will attract them that. And of course, when it comes to online stuff, you can have the latest videos uploaded, you know, little, you know, and things like that, and it keeps their interest.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think?
How about a little animation series especially aimed at a younger audience? Wouldn't that be a great idea?
Perfect.
It's UFOs but animated.
Dave said he always wanted model kits of UFOs.
Who did?
Davey.
Yeah, model kits of UFOs. I mean, I was looking on eBay for them the other day. The price of them is ridiculous. You're paying 40 quid for the equivalent of like a 172 Airfix model kit for a UFO. It was
I've got some here that would cost you a lot more than that, Jimmy. I collect all that kind of stuff,
Well, that's it. I mean, that was
again,
like proper basics. I remember, was it last year? They took all the German Bell ones off. Is it the Hohen Bell?
Well, I just think that was a marketing ploy. I don't think they took them off sale at all. I just think that was a marketing ploy to sell them.
But how much has the price gone up? They've gone from like a 20 quid kit to like 45, 50 quid basic.
Because they don't want you getting all this stuff.
They want to make money from you, Mika. Well, it's when I publish the books, Jim. Is I try and keep the price down as low as possible, because it's not all I'm a commercial animal. Nothing wrong with that, no. But I don't want to exploit either. And what when we do with as we mentioned before we went online, I've been doing a lot with the Pascagoula case from 1973. The original book on that was published in 1983, and I went online to try and buy a second-hand copy. It's long since out of print, and I think the cheapest you could get one for was like £50.
Yeah,
I thought, that's amazing. So what I did, I tracked down the people that had the copyright to it and got their permission to reprint it. So rather than paying 50, 60, 70 pounds for a copy, I sell it at $20. Wow. It's exactly the same. All the information is the same. All the photographs the same. It's just a different cover and under a different imprint.
Would you mind explaining to a couple of the people that are in the chat room that are new what that case is, please, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in Pascagoula is a small town in Mississippi. And back on October the 11th, 1973, two colleagues went fishing one night on the river. They were Charles Hickson, who was 42 years old, and his companion was Calvin Parker, who was 19. Now, they're driven into this place, parked the car up. They passed some no entry signs. It's not out of the way. There's a big bridge goes over the motorway. It's Highway 90 there. So it's not in the middle of nowhere. And they started fishing off an old abandoned pier. And like most fishing stories, they weren't having much luck. And then behind them, some blue lights appeared. Now, Calvin thought, oh, it's the police. We're going to spend the night in jail for trespassing because we passed that no entry sign. Of course, when they turned around, it wasn't the police. It was a large oval object with two lights at the left-hand end dropping down in front of them. So there was no way to run. They were surrounded by water on three sides and this thing in front of them. And it stopped just a couple of feet off the ground. An opening appeared at the other end. These three very strange and peculiar looking humanoid figures literally floated out. And I mean floated. They didn't walk, they floated. Two of them got hold of Charles Hickson. One of them got hold of Calvin Parker, took them on board this thing. This mechanical device went around them as if scanning them. And then they were deposited back on the pier. They panicked, got to their car, zoomed off, and then they calmed down a bit and they decided to call the local Air Force base, a place called Keesler. So they found a phone box, call box. There were no mobile phones in 1973. They phoned Keesler Air Force Base, who said, we're not interested. Phoned the police. So they stormed off again, stopped again. This time they phoned the police. They said, stay there. We'll come out and get you. So the police sent a guy out. They escorted them into town, interviewed them separately, but the police department didn't really believe them. So what they did, they put them in a room together, and in a table next to them, unknown to Hickson and Parker, was a tape recorder. And they left them for a few minutes and then came back in, took the tape out of the drawer without them seeing it, and went and played it. And on this tape, they were still talking about what had happened to them. Calvin's panicking like mad. He's almost praying at one point. These two were fairly religious gentlemen. How we're going to tell the family what's going to happen, So it convinced the police that they were the genuine article. The next day, somehow it leaked into the media, so they descended upon them. And then you mentioned him just a few minutes ago from Project Blue Book, Dr. Alan Hynek and another chap called Dr. James Harder descended on it. And they interviewed the guys. They took a lie detector test. Charlie Hickson was even put under hypnosis. And before they left, Dr. Hynek had a press conference saying these two gentlemen are the genuine article. Please leave them alone. So that's it all condensed. There's a lot more to the story, but that's sort of, we haven't got that much time to go into it in greater detail. Charlie Hickson is now dead. He died in 2011. So when I got the rights to republish his book, I thought it would be nice to get an update from the other guy, because Calvin hadn't really, he sort of run away from it. He was that scared, and he'd been running for over 40 years. But I managed to track him down. And my idea was just get an interview with him and maybe put an update in the back of the book. Well, Calvin had retired, and his wife had given him a bit of grief, like wives can do from time to time, allegedly. And she said, why don't you write your story in a book? And of course, hey, presto, I said, what a great idea, and I'll help you with it. So after a few months, phone calls and emails backwards and forwards, he said, okay. And that came out last year, and has, has been a great success. So, and that all came from seeing a copy of the original book online for £50 and thinking, what a ripoff. I actually bought it, by the way. I did buy it. So the commercial side of things is important, but it's more important to get the information out there. And Calvin, as we speak, is speaking at a conference in the Ozark Mountains today, literally any time now, I believe.
We've got friends out there for that one. So if you're out there, if you're watching, hello from us.
Well, that's a really weird story. How they thought it was the police when really, was there any roads nearby?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, they'd driven in on their car and parked it about, 100 yards away. So there was a dirt track. And like I said, they passed a no entry sign. So when they saw the blue lights, their natural reaction was, oh, it must be the police. And they're either going to tell us to move on, or we're going to get arrested and put into jail for the night for trespassing. Well, I think they would rather have spent a night in jail, to be honest, compared to what did happen to them. And what is really interesting, this is where research comes in. And there's nothing to stop anybody getting involved in this. Since we published Calvin's book, and he's done a little bit of local television, we have managed to track down 5 independent witnesses to the events that night who had never spoken to anyone about it before.
Yeah, Jason has just come on and said that some woman came forward. She was over the river from them.
Who was that?
She's seen a lot. Jason Goldthorpe.
Oh, Jason from the Unidentified.
Well, yeah, the people.
Maybe a month ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly incorrect is that they didn't come forward. We tracked them down. Which yeah. And what happened was Calvin did a little TV piece for local television. And that snippet, 10 minutes or so, was put on YouTube. And a young lady wrote on it, my mum and dad were on the opposite side of the river that night, and they saw it as well. And I saw that comment, and I contacted her, and eventually she gave us the telephone number of her mum and dad. I can name them, the Mr. and Mrs. Blair. And my colleague, Dr. Irina Scott in the States, interviewed them on the telephone. Calvin's met them. They have now gone on the record themselves. And through that, we managed to find a few others. And they've all gone on the record. So it's expanded the breadth of the investigation. And we do know that there are others that have seen it. I managed to contact the police dispatcher. So he's the guy that actually took the phone call that night from Charles Hickson. And he's retired now. And he said, Philip, he said, I must have taken 50 calls about it that night from other people. And this is not only that, when I finished my shift and went into the police station, there were people in the police station reporting it, one of which was a clergyman. Now, out of all this, I got contacted by a chap from Greece, and he was called Stephanos Panagiatakis. Now,
Local name, like that.
there's a connection to you here, roughly. Stephanos was in the Merchant Navy.
Oh, hello.
And he was a radio officer in the Merchant Navy. And in 1981, they docked in Pascagoula. Now, he was also a UFO researcher. And he thought, great, nobody knew what Pascagoula was. They had no idea. He even had to point it out to the people in charge where it was on the map, you know. So while he was there in 1981, he took the chance to track down a few people, including Charlie Hickson. But because he was Greek, he was introduced to a Greek pastor, a clergyman. And he was the clergyman that the police officer was talking about being in the police station.
No way.
Night. Absolutely. And he interviewed him, and he wrote a little book about it, which I published, you know, The Road to Pascagoula, it's called. And in there is the interview that he did with Pastor Sigalis, and it's in there. And so the Merchant Navy played a part in that investigation as well. Just if it was the Greek Merchant Navy, but there you go. You're all comrades in arms.
Well, you're all right, because I've just got my Cypriot discharge book as well. So I'm a binational sailor now. So
Well,
I've got
go.
British. Yeah, absolutely. And
But
all
again,
of these books, are they all available on Flying Disc Press?
Yeah, they're all on Flying Disc Press. They're all on Amazon. You know, you'll find them all there. And
No,
Stephanos
we've got a link
published.
to Flying Disc in the description.
Yeah, they're all there. Stephanos published it in Greek, and I said, "Well, I'll do it. It's not going to be a bestseller, but I just felt it was information that needed to be published." And he's over the moon. And we've just got it published in Spanish just a short while ago, because we've set up a branch of Flying Disc Press in Latin America. It's actually based in Argentina, but it's going to publish most, if not all, of our books in Spanish as well. And it just shows you what you can do. He had, I think, a week they were in port. They got delayed. It was only supposed to be a couple of days, but they got delayed. So we made the best of it. No internet. How do I find people? And he started at the newspaper office, because he knew the local newspaper had covered the story. So in walks this Greek guy, and they introduced him to the pastor. The pastor said, "I know Charlie Hickson," and it went from, and that's just with a bit of initiative, a camera and a notebook. And that's it.
That is insane. That is insane.
Yeah. No apps.
Wow.
no,
Yeah.
no GPS, nothing. Just a bit of gumption, bit of initiative, and the basic tools. And that
Good
was
old
it.
fashioned detective work.
Well, like he said, you know, he asked me if I had a kit bag. Yeah, he had a camera, a tape recorder, and a notepad and pen. And off he went. And he's actually given me the original tape interview with Charlie Hickson that he made in 1981. I have it here. And you know, I've listened to it. I have sat down on my old cassette player with my headphones on and listened to it. And it's fascinating. It is really fascinating. And it's part of UFO history. You know,
Will you be uploading the audio onto YouTube or anything?
Don't know yet. I've just literally sent it to a friend of mine to be digitized. Yeah. So you know, it will be available in digital format before too long. So we're not sure what we're going to do with it yet, because Calvin's signed up with a producer who's looking to make a documentary, so they may want to use it. And he's also hoping that this will lead to a movie as well, but we never know.
Well, you know, that's pretty. Honestly, everything there was just so synchronistic and just insane. It really was, how everything kind of happened. Everyone was there.
Well, you asked me off air about Pascagoula, and something new happens all the time. And I've just did a bit of rummaging around on online, and I found not Calvin, but the other gentleman, Charlie Hickson. I found a hypnosis session with him from 1974. So this is the year after the event actually happened. And again, I tracked down who had this, and I now have the audio file of that particular hypnosis session. And you know, I'm on the trail of other stuff as well. Whether it'll turn up or not, I don't know, but it just shows you with a bit of digging what can be achieved.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if I can do that, anyone can. You know, it just takes that bit of determination and a bit of stubborn. I'm not going to give in. I'm going to find. And what I've often said to people who are in research and investigation, you may try this month, try and find a bit of info about something, and you don't. But the world changes so much. There's nothing to say that if you try again the following month, you might just find something, because things change so rapidly and things are added online faster than you can keep up with it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I've tracked down documents, because Calvin lost everything he had in Hurricane Katrina. His house was under 8 feet of water, you know? I think part of the town was under 20 feet of water, you know, so a lot of stuff has just gone forever. So I made it a kind of mission, if you like, to try and track down anything related to that incident, be it photographs, documents, you know. Now, here's a little interesting thing. Calvin said when these creatures got hold of him, he was terrified, panicking. But he said he felt like a little nip or a little prick. And all of a sudden he was calm. And he said it felt like an injection. Now, I went to the organization called the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies. It is alleged that this was Hynek's favorite case. It is alleged that Hynek had a file on it. So I asked them for their file, if they had one, which they sent me in PDF format. It's mostly newspaper cuttings and stuff like this. But right smack in the middle of this file is just one page of typewritten text, not computer, typewritten. And the way you can tell it's typewritten, because they've actually typed over the date. They've put the wrong date and then they've gone back and done it again. And it's a medical report of the examination of Hickson and Parker. And this is just 2 days after the event. And the report says both men had puncture wounds.
Wow.
And that's just by a bit of digging and asking, you know. And I asked Calvin about this. He said, well, the only chap that examined us was Dr. James Harder. So it had to be written by him, because he was the only person that examined us, you know. We did go to the hospital, but they didn't examine us. They took a blood test and said, waved a flashing light in front of your eyes. That was about it. So so again, you know, just by digging, we've unearthed that. And I think it's a hugely significant document. But if you don't ask Mika, don't ask Jim, you don't find out. You know,
no, absolutely.
And if you ask in the right manner, who knows what you may find.
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree more. And it's also the fact that, I mean, we've got such things like that, you know, and I have learned that just because something's improbable, it's not impossible. But also, our field is littered with hoaxes. And I think that's one of the other things that really put a lot of people off what we do, what we look at, what we study. I mean, for example, we were talking before the show, weren't we, about the Roswell alien hoax? Yeah.
I mean, it's the biggest hoax of anything. It's bigger than the Hitler diaries. It's bigger than Piltdown Man. You know, it's bigger than, I think they've found somebody's diaries in the US, or somebody's money. The reason I say it was the biggest hoax, that's based on the coverage it got. Because the internet had just started, and the TV coverage it got, the amount of money it made, and we're talking millions, and it even had a movie made out of it. Yep. So when you add all that together, it is the biggest hoax of everything. And it's the alien autopsy film. And yours truly was involved in it right from day one. I mean, right from the very beginning. We've got time to talk about it, yeah?
We have totally got time, because I was hoping we could swing round to this, because it's something that I'm interested in myself.
Well, I was also the press officer for Bufora. And in 1993, I got a letter from a company called the Merlin Group. And the gentleman writing was a chap called Ray Santilli. Initially, it just asked if Bufora would be able to assist in the making of a UFO documentary. So I wrote back, said, I'm sure we can. This is what we can and can't do. Sent him an information leaflet. you know, fairly standard. He wrote back. So I phoned him, and he just talked about, did we have any film that we could license, photographs, and I explained that we didn't have a lot of that, although I knew places where he could license such things from, legitimately. And then I phoned him again, and then he said, well, I've actually got film of the aliens being autopsied at Roswell. And I said, oh, yeah. That's moved on a bit since our last conversation. And I said, if that's the case, then show me. Show me. So he says, yes, I will. No, I can't. Yes, I can. No, I can't. Anyway, later in that year, the movie Fire in the Sky came out. It's about Travis Walton. And I was hired to help promote it. So what I did with Travis Walton and Mike Rogers and their respective wives, we put on a lecture for them in London, and the press were all invited. Now, Ray Santilli's offices weren't that far away from where we were holding this event, so I invited him along, and that was the first time I met him. He told me, I'm in film, I buy music, and I license this and I license that. I was in Cleveland, and I bought some old film of Elvis from an old boy, and it's him I bought this Roswell film from, and I paid cash for it. And so I said, again, show me. He said, well, I've got a third party involved. I may be able to. I said, I'll go away. I just don't believe you. So I more or less dismissed it. So we moved forward in time to 1995. I'm also Bufora's conference organizer. And that August, I got a conference pretty much set up in Sheffield. And I got a video sent to me of Roswell, the movie that was just coming out. And it was sent to us for review. It was only a small time release. And I thought, oh, that Santilli fella, he said he had film of the Roswell. And I got his business card. So I rang him up again. And he said, well, yes, Philip, I do have it, but you don't believe me. I said, well, I can only believe you if you show me it. So he said, okay, speak to my secretary and make an appointment and come and see us. So my wife and I, drove down to London into his offices, and hey presto, on the video VHS, he showed us over the next couple of months all the film. There's 5 bits of film in total. So again, I'm thinking, what are you going to do with this? And he says, well, I'm going to package it and sell it on video. So I said, well, will you show it at our conference? I just thought this film has to get out into the public domain. It's the only way we're going to figure anything out. So to my surprise, he said yes. So we shook hands on it. There was no money involved or anything like that. Later on, the story of it slipped out into the newspapers, and it became a real, how can I say it, circus. And Santilli, of course, then got offers for television and sold it around the world. But he did turn up at our conference in Sheffield in 1995 and show it to a packed audience. And the rest, as they say, is history, and it's still being discussed even today in different parts of the world,
Absolutely. Still here as well.
Yeah, and it is a fake. And we can't, we gave him every opportunity to prove it was authentic, which he didn't. Yeah. So it kind of became personal with me, because I was even accused of being involved in it by some idiots, So I sat with Ray one day in London having lunch, and I said, I'll get to the bottom of this film. And he said, that's okay, Philip. And I thought, once it's out on television, that'll be the end of it. People will come forward and say, that's me, or I supplied the props, or I made the dummy. And none of that happened. Absolute silence. Nothing. Not a thing. So it made it that much more difficult. Right. And I was determined to find out, not just be convinced it was a fake, but to prove it. And it took me an awful long time. But in the end, I found the fella from where the idea had first started, right the way through to the man that led the team that hoaxed it, that made the dummies and made the film. And that was a chap called Spiros Malaris, another Greek, of Greek origin. And it, it is a hoax, but it was a huge story at the time. It was amazing. you know.
Absolutely. I mean, like upstairs, I mean, I've got the documentary version of it. Then I've got obviously the movie that was made of it, because like for me, like growing up, as I've said before to you, it was such a big thing. Everyone was just, I mean, yourself, I mean, what was your opinion when you first watched it genuinely?
Well, the first piece of film we saw is one that's not really being shown on television. It's called the tent footage. And it's a grainy black and white film, lasts about 15 minutes. And it's what Santilli told us was this was on site in the desert. They erected a tent, and it was a basic examination of the creature. So you've got two men in white coats with a creature on the slab covered mainly by a white blanket. You can see its head and its hands. And then there's a gentleman with his back to the camera, walks in and out of frame every now and again. And I still have that. Santilli gave me a copy of it. I still have the VHS of it. So that was the first thing. And then we were shown two different autopsies. Only one has ever been seen on television, but we were shown two.
Whoa.
And then we were shown the debris, you know, the panels and all that stuff. And then later on, there was the so-called interview with the alleged cameraman, you know. So that, you know, there's 5 pieces of separate film here in total.
I only ever thought that was the main one.
No, there's 2. The other one is much clearer. You know, it's a brighter film. It's the same creature, same room. They carry out a different sort of medical procedure, and so it is a totally different piece of film. So when we get to Spiros Milaris, the guy who was the mastermind behind the hoax in it, he explained why you have 2 separate films. The one you see, that everyone's seen, the creature has a damaged leg and what have you. Well, they'd filmed the other one the night before. And Spiros's girlfriend at the time was like their, in inverted commas, medical expert. She wasn't a medical expert, but she'd done the research. And when they looked at the film, she said, "You've made a mistake with the medical procedure. If you release that, they'll be able to spot it instantly that it's a fake."
Oh,
so they had to do another model that night for the following day, and that's where you get the hole in the leg. It actually had an air pocket in it, and they'd run out of money, so they improvised. They stuffed it with, you know, something from the butchers. They got a blowtorch on it to burn the edges. So that's why you get the 2. That's why the other one that hasn't been seen is much brighter, because it was never going to be released. So Spiros didn't need to age it a little bit. The one that you see is being aged. So, and of course, we were shown these films in Santilli's office. And I'm not the only one that's seen it. There's about 4 or 5 people seen it, you know, not just me, but that is it. You know, that is the lot, you know.
That's insane.
I think they were even planning more, because Santilli said originally, "Oh, you know, President Truman was there and you could see his lips moving. You'd be able to read his lips, because President Truman's not on any of this." So Spiros came up with the idea of actually building a flying saucer and having an actor with prosthetics on made to look like President Truman and standing there and talking, and you'd be able to read his lips. And he even looked at a disused go-kart stadium where they were going to film it. And not only that, it was going to build a 2D American truck, but it would look 3-dimensional. And he has a huge file like this of all of American trucks. And he says, "This is the one I was going to use, because you can see the number plate. So if you would have gone back to the record center in America and checked that number plate, they would be able to say, yeah, that is one of our trucks, you know." But that bit never happened. But that's how far they wanted to take it, you know.
That is so mad.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know, that's left me almost speechless, that, hasn't that? Don't happen very often, Phil.
Well, listen to this. This is, I'll tell you, it's even more speechless how it all started. Santilli used to work with a company called AK Music. They were friends, colleagues, did work with each other. And it was at AK Music's place. And they used to have daft brainstorming sessions. See who could come up with this most stupid idea, you know. And one of their employees at AK Music has got a book on Roswell. and he's called Phil Jarman. I've spoken to him, and he just said, wouldn't it be great if we had some footage of the Roswell UFO crash? And that's how it all started. You know, that's how it began. Just an off-the-cuff remark. Now, AK Music was Andy and Keith's music. You know, K is Keith Bateman. And Keith is a real character. I've met him. So he went away and he made the tent footage. It's actually filmed in a barn in Bedfordshire. Right? And he took that to Santilli. He said, look at this. And Santilli said, that's rubbish. Go away, get me a quote to make a real autopsy. Now, Keith went away, got a quote. I don't know where from, but he got a quote. And then he added his own percentage on it. And Santilli said, that's too much. But Santilli kept the tent footage. So that's where he got. And then he made up the story. Along comes Spiros. He actually met Spiros by accident at a film festival in Cannes, in France. Mm-hmm. And he told him this story. I've got this cameraman's film. So Spiros says, I'll look you up when we get back to London. He goes in his office. He plays him it and said, that's fake. That's never been shot on film. That's video. But he says, if you want some real autopsy film, I'll make you some. My friend, John Humphreys, is a top class model maker, sculptor. And that's how it all, again, just quite by chance. Now, according to Spiros, and I've no reason to disbelieve this, the idea was to make the alien autopsy film. They would release it because he was like a cameraman for hire. He ran his own little business to do pop videos and all kinds of stuff. And then 6 months later, if nobody had figured out, they'd then go, ta-da, look how good we were, in the hope that it would get them some more work. But Santilli then got the money rolling in. So he said to Spiros, nah, let's leave it. You know, nothing's happened. He was still selling the story that he'd faked. He poured out a lot of money to buy this rubbish film. So Spiros wandered off into the distance and Santilli raked it in. You know, so it all started with just an off-the-cuff remark at a silly brainstorming session and ended up making millions.
Any idea roughly how many millions it did make in the end, Phil?
I can guess, but tens of millions.
That
For
is
example,
insane.
when the film was shown in America, it was Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction on the Fox network. They paid $250,000 for the rights, plus a share of the video sales.
Wow.
Now, think again, it was shown all over the world, different territories. And then they did the Ant and Dec movie, Alien Autopsy. Yep. You know, they had a £5 million budget for that. That's not a bad budget for a film, you know.
Yeah, right.
So, wow. You know, just add it all up, a lot of money.
Yeah. And people say there's no money to be made from the ufology field, right? Right, Phil, are you ready for questions?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, fire away.
Right. We will spin you around to Sarah. Here we go. There she is.
Good evening, Sarah.
Hello.
Let's move that stormtrooper out of the way.
How you doing? Are you
fine,
surviving?
thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we've had a few questions in from the chat room, so I'm just going to fire them off and we'll see where we go from there. Okay, we've had John who has asked, what are your thoughts on USOs?
Good question, because I've actually co-authored a book on USOs with my colleague Paul Stonehill. Paul's originally from the Ukraine, so his original name is Pavel. But he left the Ukraine when he was a teenager because that was still under the Soviet Union at that time. And he slipped out and went to live in California. There was a time, actually, later in his life when Paul was on the KGB's wanted list because he helped smuggle other people out of the Ukraine from behind the Iron Curtain.
Wow.
Now, in the late 1980s, I'm digressing a little bit, but you'll see the point in it. There was a big sighting in a place called Voronezh in Russia. I think it was 1987. And this thing was supposed to land, creatures were seen, it left marks behind. And the information was actually released by the official Soviet news agency, TASS. And it made it into the papers in the West. So the papers in the West contacted TASS. I said, are you joking? And in a typical sort of Russian voice, they said, we don't joke, you know. So out of the blue, I was contacted by a newspaper in Russia called Izvestia, and they asked for my details about this landing. What did I make of it? So I told them, and lo and behold, it got published. And in the newspaper article, although I couldn't read it at the time, it said Philip Mantle, UFOs, Batley, which is where I lived, England. And then I started getting these letters addressed just like that from Russia. They found me. And it was people who'd read the newspaper article, reporting their own sightings, you know, UFO researchers in Russia writing to me. I even got books sent, couldn't read any of them. So I knew my colleague Paul Stonehill in the States. So I packed all this stuff up and sent it to Paul. And that's how we began to work together. And of course, once the Soviet Empire had fallen and the internet emerged, we were able to cooperate more closely with our contacts in Russia. And one of the areas we looked at is USOs. And, you know, the certain parts of the ocean we know less about than we do the moon. You know, the deepest part of the ocean, I think, is something like, I don't know, 11 miles deep. And there's only been 5 people there. So there's actually been more people on the moon than there has been there. And of course, there's a lot of UFO sightings or USO sightings in and around these areas. And so we looked at those, and we looked at a place called Lake Baikal in Russia. It's one of the, I think it's the biggest freshwater body of lake there is, or something like that, where strange things have been seen as well. And we published a book called Russia's USO Secrets. So from an area of study, Sarah, it's one of the great untapped fields of UFO study, and it's, you know, we're hoping to do some more on it in the future. So it is a fascinating area of subject that Paul and I have delved into, and we actually got the book published last year in Russian. So wow. Yeah, that took me a few years to persuade them, but we got it done in the end. And there's very few UFO researchers from the West have had their work published in the Russian language, and we got a couple more coming out there later this year, including Calvin Parker's book about Pascagoula. That will be available in Russian.
Wow, that is amazing. Okay, John has asked your best UFO sightings that you have had.
I've had 2. The first one was on a place called Carlton Moor, which is just above the town of Skipton in North Yorkshire. And like we mentioned earlier on, this area used to have a lot of sightings, an awful lot. And we used to do sky watches there. So my colleague Graham Birdsall, sadly no longer with us, contacted me one night, said, you fancy going up there for an hour? And it was about an hour and a half drive from where we lived. And we stood on Carlton Moor in the pitch black. There's no lights. When you look out over the moor, we've been there so many times, there's no buildings, there's no lights. And there's a little light appeared in the distance. And I nudged Graham and said, what's that? Now, Graham was driving. So he said, let's go and take a closer look. So we jumps in the car. And if anybody knew Graham, they'll confirm this. I mean, he used to drive like a madman in the daylight. It was even worse in the dark. So we're tearing across the moor, you know, pitch black. And then I'm looking out of the passenger side, and I don't know if the dry stone wall had fallen away or it was an entrance, but I could see right down the valley, literally, and hanging in the air. This is about 1 o'clock in the morning. There is a huge cartwheel of coloured lights just hanging there in the air, and then poof, we'd flown past it. I tell Graham, and that just made him drive faster and get even more angry because he hadn't seen it, you know. I won't repeat the words that he was saying, but there was a route that we could circumnavigate the moor, and we drove all the way around it. Didn't see anything else that night. So, I mean, that you know, it was for a split second, and it just confirmed to me that we weren't wasting our time up in the moors. We spent a lot of time in and around there speaking to people and what have you. And that was as close as any of us actually got to viewing the phenomena ourselves. So that certainly sticks in my mind. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Oh, is there still a national database for sightings in the UK? Which we've already touched on that, haven't we? There isn't actually one still available.
No, there's no database. One of the, the sort of bugbears of any research that goes back pre-internet days is, what do you do with all your material? And it's the kind of discussion I've been having with a couple of colleagues now. As I mentioned to Jim and Mika, I've got cabinet file of paper files, boxes full of it. Is what to do with it? There isn't any repository here in the UK. One thing to look at is the Archives for UFO Research, and it is based in Sweden. And they have had some private funding, and they have probably got the biggest collection of UFO material anywhere in the world. And I've donated things to them as well. So that's the Archives for UFO Research in Sweden. Have a look at that. And what they do, if they get duplicates of things, they're taking books, reports, you name it. If they get a duplicate, they put it on their website for sale. So you get some really unique little items on there for sale that you probably won't find anywhere else.
Okay.
Can we come round and have a rummage through your stuff one day?
I bet you say that to all the girls, don't you? I bet you said that to Sarah when you first met. Can I come around and have a rummage through your stuff? I beg your pardon. You Navy boys, you're all the same.
Yeah, that's not the line you used on me.
That's just made it weird now. I'll explain when you're older, son.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
Have you had any Men in Black experiences?
No, never. And I've been asked that question a few times. Have anybody of an official nature ever approached you or anything like that? Certainly not, no. However, when we used to run the Yorkshire UFO Society, one of the things we did notice is that a lot of our incoming mail, was officially opened and resealed. And the post office would put a sticker across it, and it would say officially opened and resealed. And it got to the stage where Graham actually complained to the postmaster, and they came out to see us about it. And I remember sitting there and the chap saying, well, yeah, we do open occasional bits and pieces, or something may get torn open, accidentally, and we stick it down. We put one of these stickers on it. And he said, this will only happen once in a while. So Graham got this huge, great carrier bag and tipped all these things on the table in front of him and said, what? This is once in a while? And there was a ton of it. And the chap didn't know what to say. He had no idea. So
Wow.
That's the closest I could say to anything fishy, if you like, in that respect. Sometimes they put it down to curious postmen when it said the Yorkshire UFO Society on it, I wonder what's in that. But it went way beyond that. It really did.
Okay. Jason, we've already answered your question. It was the same as John before. So I'm going to skip to the next one. Mike, who has asked, who were your biggest influences?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, to begin with, it was Mark and Graham Birdsall. That's who I learnt the ropes from. I've also been fortunate to meet, many UFO researchers. I never met Alan Hynek. I seem to miss him just by, a week or two, wherever I went. But certainly Dr. Jacques Vallée, I met him on a number of occasions and had private discussions with him. Another one, a researcher you very rarely hear about now, was a British guy. It was Hilary Evans. And his wife used to run the Mary Evans Picture Library in London. Hilary was an amazing man and vastly underrated. So I would say Hilary and Jacques Vallée and Graham and Mark Birdsall were my biggest influences.
Okay, fair enough. This one again is from John. If you could go sky watching anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Now I'd probably go back to our old haunts. If it was somewhere local I had to go, I'd certainly go back out to Carlton Moor in and around Skipton. However, if I could travel a little bit further afield, and this is something you can look up online as well. I go back to Project Hestalen in central Norway, and again in the early 80s, the Hestalen Valley in central Norway was literally haunted by these strange apparitions, strange lights, and the UFO groups of Norway and Sweden set up an encampment there, literally, and begged, stole, and borrowed a whole host of equipment, including radar and various film and cameras, and managed to record the phenomena as well. They then got funding. Now the site is now, under scientific scrutiny on a permanent basis, so you can log on to Project Hestalen's website and view a live webcam from there, and you can look up the latest photographs, both still and movie. So I'd probably like to go. I went to Hestalen in the 1980s in the winter. It's about minus 14 degrees, I think, when we got there. Alan Hynek went there a couple of years before me. Didn't see anything, unfortunately, and I didn't fancy spending a night out there in that kind of temperature. But these gentlemen did. So I'd like to go back there if I got the opportunity.
Okay, sorry, what was that?
How's that spelled? What was the web address for that one, Philip?
It's just, if you just type in Project Hestalen, you'll find it. There's HESSDALEN, Hestalen.
Okay, cheers, buddy.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anyone's questions as I'm talking to you. Yeah, because I copy and then I paste to another page, so I don't want to miss anyone's questions. Okay, here's the next one. Sorry, bear with me.
We've got a lot of questions.
What is the most interesting case you have researched in the last 10 years?
Well, I think we've been talking about it this evening. It's the incident from Pascagoula in 1973. Although it didn't happen in the last 10 years, obviously. We've managed to uncover so much about it in such a short space of time. I mean, I remember reading about the Pascagoula case in a magazine in the early 80s, and it just fascinated me from that day. And, I felt privileged when I managed to track down Calvin and speak to him on the phone. And he still finds that funny now. People will ask him to autograph his book, and he's just a country boy, and he just finds that peculiar. And he just laughs. He has a grin on his face. But, we've uncovered so much. We've only been able to touch on it tonight, Sarah, some of the things we've uncovered. And things are ongoing as well. We're still digging. And people say, well, it's an old case. What's this? What's that? Well, we have to remember, probably one of the world's most famous cases, probably the most famous, is the crash at Roswell in 1947.
Yeah.
And the witnesses to that weren't interviewed and tracked down until the 1980s and 1990s. So if you'd have used that attitude then, it's an old case, we're not interested, then none of that would have been uncovered. So it is a fascinating. Pascagoula is unique for a whole host of reasons, and then to be able to add to that case and research it from my little office here in England, and with my colleague Dr. Irina Scott in the US, and then Calvin Parker himself on site. I just feel privileged to be part of it, and it just shows what you can do with a little bit of determination, and you don't need a bucket load of money either.
No. It's brilliant. Okay. What is your favorite UFO researcher? Not just your influence, your favorite.
Well, I'd go back to certainly Hilary Evans. Hilary was an all-round sort of Fortean researcher, delved into lots of subjects, and he had he was one of my favorites. And of course, if I'm honest, Jenny Randalls, she was my predecessor at Pew Forward as Director of Investigations. I read many of Jenny's books as a young fella, and she's still involved now. Is Jenny? She took a few years out, to look after her parents, and I would recommend any of Jenny's earlier books, certainly things called UFO Study is a good one. That's a fact, and you can pick these up, online for not a lot of money. So I certainly look at some of Jenny's earlier works. I think they were sort of groundbreaking in many ways. So certainly Hillary still is up there as one of my favorites. It really is.
Okay. A question from Davey. Do you have any thoughts on the UK crop circles?
Well, again, I remember when the crop circles first hit the headlines here in the UK in the newspapers, round about 1983, I think it was, somewhere around there. I'm not saying there weren't any crop circles before that. I'm saying that's when they first hit the headlines in the national newspapers that opened it up to us. And there were a set of circles appeared in Westbury in Wiltshire, near the White Horse, just below the White Horse in Westbury. So I literally, with a colleague of mine, I was talking to Jim about my kit bag, threw that in the car, and off we went. Boiling hot day in the summer. We drove down to Wiltshire. We found this location, found the circles, got in, measured them and photographed them and all this lot. And it, it was fascinating. But I think down the years, and some people won't like this answer, I don't think there's an awful lot to it. I think most, if not all of them, are man-made. They are fakes. And one of the reasons I believe that is because I know one of the guys that does fake them, and doesn't hide that fact. There's a chap called John Lundberg. He's an artist. He's John. And people would say, did you fake this formation or that formation? And he wouldn't always answer them. He'd just sort of smile and leave them to think about it, playing little mind games with them. And there was also an occasion in the Midlands where a formation of circles were uncovered. And they brought in the local researcher and he said, oh, they're genuine and this and that. And of course, we knew the guys that had made it. Not only did we know them, they'd filmed themselves making it. And then they just sat back and waited for somebody to find it. And of course, once it had been authenticated, they said, well, I'm sorry, you were wrong. So, but there would be people who obviously don't agree with that, but that's just my opinion. I don't think there's anything to them. I think they're all man-made, or pretty much so anyway.
Okay. So that covers his second part of his question, whereas he says, has there been a downturn in their appearances in the last few years?
I think there has, but I think there's also been an upturn in the places they appear. They were predominantly in the south of England or the West Country, but now they've moved into other parts of the world, Yeah. So there may not be as many anymore, but they've certainly spread.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a question from Tinette, who is one of our latecomers to the show. She's actually asked, do you think there are Nazi bases on the moon?
No.
Good question.
End of story.
Right.
Space travel wasn't invented at the time the Nazis were in power. End of story. Simple as that.
Fair play. That's a very simple and direct.
Yeah.
Okay. Davy's asked, can you give us your thoughts? Oh, hang on, that's the same one. Sorry, I've done that twice. Do you think that there is a spiritual connection with UFOs?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I've sent Jim my first book. It was called Without Consent. It was originally published in 1994, and it deals with, that's it. Yeah, it's he's put a bookmark in there, pretending he's read part of it. Look,
It's your business card.
I know what it is. Yeah.
Ah.
So it's all about missing time and abduction cases in the UK and the UK only. And what I did after we published the book, I spoke to a number of the people in it, the abductees, the witnesses, whatever you want to call them. And I asked them what they believed was the nature and origin of their experience. And there were some that said, yeah, I'm fully convinced this were beings from another world. Another section of them said, I don't know, Philip. That's why we came to you. But then there were another few of them said, no, they felt it was some kind of spiritual experience. It had nothing to do with aliens or ETs or anything like that. So I would have to say, yes, there is a spiritual side to it, but that tends to come more from the individuals that have had these experiences rather from a research point of view. And I've just found it fascinating that, when you ask the people that's had the encounters what they believed on it, that they came out with a diverse range of explanations themselves. And the spiritual aspect was one of them. There's one lady, again, she's no longer with us. She was called Elsie Oakinson, lived down near Northampton. And Elsie actually became a spiritual healer. And she put it all down to that experience she had that night driving home from work when she had the encounter.
Is there any possibility you might be able to send us a few of your business cards down, Phil? Because there's a couple of people that would like one.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. No problem.
Absolutely. Right, cool. So if you're in the chat room and you've mentioned it, send me your address via private and I'll get one sent out to you.
There we go.
Oh, hang on. Right. One of the guys has said, obviously, you've answered the question on the Nazi thing. Sorry to jump in. But he wants to know, secret space program, fact or myth?
I was going to say something quite rude then.
Go for it.
No, I'd just say
option.
Absolute nonsense. Simple as that. I mean, you can't fire a rocket into space without somebody seeing it. How could you keep it secret? It's just not possible. And then you've got all the hardware that's supposed to go with it. I believe some of these secret space programs are based somewhere else. I don't know if it's on the moon or Mars or wherever. It's just nonsense, absolute nonsense. And it'll disappear in a few years and be laughed at. It's of no more relevance than the flat earth.
Thank you for that, mate. Thank you.
Okay. Davies asked, did you have any involvement with Bonnie Bridge cases?
No, I didn't. I mean, I've lectured up there during the Bonnie Bridge flap or wave, if you like. My colleague Malcolm Robinson was probably the main researcher. Malcolm's from that area of Scotland. And what was fascinating was when we lectured at the town hall there, and I mean, it was absolutely packed. Such was the interest from the local community. I mean, I think they were almost fighting to get in at the end. And it wasn't, sadly, to see me and Malcolm lecturing on the stage. It was the fact that the interest, from the local community because of what had been happening there. So I didn't have any direct involvement in it, but Malcolm kept us fairly well briefed on what was going on. And I got to speak to some of the people that had, made sightings from our appearance at the conference there. It's only an evening event, but there's always time for questions and answers and mingling with people afterwards. And people were just coming out with one after another. I mean, there was a real genuine flap in Bonnie Bridge. And, Malcolm's written about it and lectured about it extensively. So I had no direct involvement, but I was kept up to date.
Okay. Okay. Brandon has asked, what do you think of King Arthur, man or myth?
Well, I've never met him,
I'd be worried if you had. You're looking good.
We've been to Scrape.
I think
have been to his grave
in Glastonbury.
I've been there as well. It would be lovely to think it was real. Let's put it that way. And let's not. It's like I was dismayed to find out that when I grew up that Robin Hood wasn't real. And I was a bit deflated. Because there is an argument that Robin Hood was real and he was actually a Yorkshireman because his grave is not that far from where I live. It's on private land is Robin Hood's grave because if you follow the Robin Hood myth or legend, or whatever you want to call it, there's lots of areas in and around here that reflect the name. And of course, near Brighouse in West Yorkshire, there is a private land with a woods on it. And that's where his grave is because he actually died at Kirklees Priory. Now, the council area in and around there is called Kirklees. There's only a few bits of rubble left of Kirklees Priory, but that's where he's supposed to have died. He was poisoned by the nuns there and he fired his arrow and they buried him there. So you come off the motorway to go into Brighouse, and you'll pass a private land on your right with lots of trees, and Robin Hood's grave is in there. So if he did exist, it was a Yorkshireman. Maybe King Arthur was as well. You know, I don't know, but it'd be nice to think it was real. So let's not spoil it all, shall we? We've already dismissed Nazi bases and crop circles, so we'll stick with King Arthur, shall we?
Okay, yeah, we'll keep something on the table. Okay, the last one I've got so far is any truth in Doctor Who?
Comment before.
Any truth in Doctor Who? Yeah, was that being...
There's a comment before it.
All right.
Hang on a second. Have I? What have I missed?
Brandon spoke to Nick Pope about Doctor Who, and Nick Pope said Doctor Who is disclosure, and then that question came in.
Oh, Doctor Who is disclosure. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's disclosure. I mean, there's been an argument, certainly since I've been involved, that the powers that be are never going to go out there and say, here it is, you know, here's disclosure. No. I mean, I discussed this recently with a chap. I mean, let's assume that they're going to announce tomorrow that we've made first contact, UFOs are real, whatever. Who would you trust to make that such a statement? Would you trust President Trump? Would you trust the United Nations? Would you trust the Pope? You know? And then if whoever did announce it, there'll still be parts of the world that would say it's rubbish. There'll be parts of the world that are not linked into Western media, so they'd never find out about it in the first instance. So the theory is that rather than an all-out disclosure, the powers that be have been releasing it into popular culture down the years through film, television, TV series like Doctor Who, like Close Encounter, like Star Wars. So we're being familiarized with the fact that there is life elsewhere. So when the fact comes, you know, that we have made contact, it won't be such a shock to Western civilization. I mean, I don't think it'd be that big a shock anyway. But I thought the gentleman was going to ask, you know, is time travel possible? Because one of the I was going to mention one of the incidents that's been reported to me recently is about a gentleman who claims he witnessed time travel. And wow. Yeah, and it comes from Pascagoula again, but it's not connected to that particular case. It's the following year. Now, this gentleman, he claims he was based at Keesler Air Force Base. He was doing his training, and they would get the bus home every night. You know, they didn't reside on the base, but they weren't allowed to go into the motor pool. And he said, we're coming out one night, and he noticed this strange-looking car, but it was getting dark. So anyway, they come back in the next morning, and this car is there. And it's a long story. He'd heard a rumor that there'd been another UFO landing and that they'd been interviewed on the base. And to cut a long story short, he said that the car that he saw in the motor pool was his car from the 1980s. And he saw a package on the back seat, and that was actually a map that his sister bought for him. And that was the map lying on the back seat. And there was even a sticker on the window, I believe. And of course, he didn't know that at the time. It was only when he progressed and he got the car and it all came back to him. This was the same car he saw in the motor pool back in 1974. And he believed that UFOs, however they get here, use time travel. And somehow he'd seen his car from the future. It wasn't a DeLorean. This is not Back to the Future, you know. And it's a very bizarre incident. I mean, he's shown me his paperwork of being in the military, you know, even his dog tags, believe it or not, and all kinds of photographs of him in uniform and that kind of thing. So he certainly was in the Air Force. He wasn't a high-ranking official or anything like that. So bizarre. It shows you what you can come across in this subject. It really does.
Absolutely. Okay, this is the last question I'm going to ask because we've actually hit 10 o'clock now, so we're almost at the 2-hour mark. So Mike has asked, any cases like the Pascagoula case in the last 10 years?
No, there isn't, and it's one of the peculiar aspects of the phenomenon. is why these most bizarre cases don't tend to crop up now like they used to do. And why is that? We don't really know. I mean, Pascagoula was extremely bizarre. The creatures that were depicted have only been depicted there and nowhere else, you know. So there may be, it's just maybe we just haven't heard about them. But what you see, Sarah, is when you look at the UFO phenomenon from day one, right up to modern times, it has evolved, it has changed, and it's continuing to change. And what that says about the subject is a different discussion. So it has certainly changed. We used to get the Space Brothers in the 1950s, you know, they come from Mars and Venus, or the dark side of the moon, where they don't, because nothing comes from there. And then it was another set of creatures, and then something different. So now it has evolved even more. So what it'd be like in 10 years' time? Well, that'll be up to Mika to find out. Probably not me.
Okay, fabulous. Okay, that's all the questions I'm taking because we're now at 10 o'clock. So I don't want to
Right,
go
okay.
too far over.
Right, so, spin it back round. Right, so, there we go. So there we go. Thank you so much for coming on and doing our beginner's guide to ufology, Phil. Honestly, it's been so good. I've been going through the chat room while you've been chatting with Sarah, and there's nothing but positives. There's a lot of people out there that are really digging your thing. So
Thank you very
fantastic. So yeah, a few have asked whether or not once we finish the beginner's guide, whether or not you'd be good enough to come back and actually do another show with us as well.
Of course I will. Anytime, mate. Anytime at all.
You're the man. We love you dearly. Thank you so much for coming on, Phil. So
Thank you, Phil.
Right, Mika, get yourself off to bed.
Oh no. We've got the second part of the show to do. Yeah, we've
Oh,
just
well.
run over time.
Thank you so much for answering all the questions. It's been fabulous meeting
My
you.
pleasure, Sarah.
Thank you.
And don't you be rummaging through anybody else's stuff.
Well, that was the idea. I definitely want to get up at some point and have a rummage. I have to see that other video. I have to, because while you were doing your thing, I got my facts
There
and
you
fiction.
go. I'm on that one. Yeah, yeah. It's not a bad movie. I'm on that one. I'm on the Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, and I'm wearing a green shirt. In those days, it was like an in joke. I did lots of interviews, and I always used to wear a green shirt.
Just because?
Because the little green man. It was my little joke, my poking fun at them. I used to wear a green shirt.
And I did notice the other day your collection has grown, hasn't it?
Oh, it keeps growing all the time, mate.
Little seats at the top
you
there.
Cannot see what's around me here. I have you've got the two figures there. I've got a full-size alien in my garage in a box, and a huge great flying saucer. It's huge in a box, and my wife just shakes her head.
Do you know what? Sarah done the same when these turned up. Funny that, isn't it?
No.
And then phoned mother-in-law and shouted at her.
My wife says, "Where are you going to put that?" I said, "Worry about that later. Don't let me worry about that."
And what's your usual answer when you get asked, "Where are you going to put that?"
You can't say that.
No, let's not go there. Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Philip. Thank you so much. All right, buddy. Right, take care, mate.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Okay, so that was it. That was our beginner's guide to ufology with the esteemed Sir Philip of Mantle.
So now, what we are getting on to is the one and only, the truly one and only, the truly one and only
Art Bell. So it was a year ago today we lost Art. At the time I was doing a podcast. I'd done a special. And I think there's sort of like momentous times in your life where certain things happen and you remember where you were. I was listening to Dave Scott and I was walking down to work. I was just about to go and join the ship. And he was interviewing our really good friend over at Disclosure Team Liverpool. And it was her first interview on radio. And I thought I'd listen, give her some support and love and everything. And she was doing so well. Then all of a sudden, Dave Scott was like, cut her short during a sentence. And she was like, we're just getting reports in at the moment that Art Bell has passed away. So with that, on the Google, doing my thing, and yeah, it'd been confirmed. And yeah, it was devastating because, you know, I was aware of art for many, many, many years, and it wasn't until I got into the community that I started to go through all these old archives and things like that. And as most of you know, Art Bell is the reason we do what we do, and the reason that I want to be a broadcaster. Where were you when you found out?
I was right here, sitting on this spot, and I was playing my game. And I remember Daddy just phoning me up, and he sounded like he was about to cry, and he was just like, Art Bell's passed. And I'm just like, what do you mean? What do you mean Art Bell's passed? He's gone. What? Where did he go? Australia? Somewhere like that. He's gone. He's passed. And I was like, oh. So
It was a bit of a bad time.
it was an awful day.
And now to Sarah. Sarah, where were you when you found out?
I think I was at home.
Yeah. It was bad times. What about the guys in the chat room? Have we got anyone there? Any of you guys in the chat room? You remember where you were when Art Bell passed? And remember, keep it clean. It is a family show.
And I also remember that Mummy was sitting right on her sofa as well, hearing the news. Like, Mummy could only just hear Daddy.
I mean, he was such an important part of our lives.
If it wasn't for him, this would be no such thing as Fascination Street. There'd be no such thing.
I mean, even as a small child, I mean, Mika and I, we used to spend the afternoon sat together, and we'd be gaming, we'd play something, I don't know, Minecraft. And
I remember that.
We'd be listening to Art Bell.
His original.
We were sat yesterday gaming, listening to Art Bell, and like for us today will always be Art Bell Day. So I imagine we've had loads of Art Bell today. There'll probably be some more later on, but when we go to bed. But yeah, it's kind of ingrained into like the fabric of kind of all of us to a degree. Got anything coming through yet?
John was driving a cab, and he was with one of his customers. Yeah.
Wow. So, for anyone watching that is unaware of Art Bell, I've actually put a little thing together today, and it's a little bit of a history of Art Bell. Because again, obviously, it is a beginner's guide, so there'll be people watching the ufology thing going into this thinking, "Who is Art Bell?" So, are we sitting comfortably, children? If we are, then I shall begin. Close. So Art Bell was an American broadcaster and author. He was known as the king of late night radio and was best known for his radio talk show Coast to Coast AM, which aired in the US and Canada. He was born Arthur William Bell III on June 17th, 1945 in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, US to Arthur William Bell Sr. and Jane Lean Gamur Bell. As a child, he was intrigued by the radio. He earned an amateur radio operator's license at the age of 13 with his first call sign KN3JOX. He upgraded the call sign to K3JOX and later qualified for an amateur extra class license, which is considered to be the topmost US Federation Communication Commission amateur license, and his call sign was W6OBB. While serving as a medic in the US Air Force during the Vietnam War, he operated a pirate radio station that aired anti-war music from Amarillo Air Base. Amarillo isn't just a song, you know, folks. After returning to the US, he worked for KIDD, where he started as a rock music DJ and moved on to conduct radio talk shows. He soon became famous for anchoring talks on topics such as gun running, the occult, UFOs, and conspiracy theories on his talk show Dreamland. He founded the Pahrump-based radio station KNYE 95.1 FM, from where he produced and aired Coast to Coast AM, which became one of the most popular radio shows in the late 1980s and early 1990s. It was aired on more than 500 stations and had around 15 million listeners. He gained credibility because he organised real-time questions and answer sessions on his show.
Is it correct?
Sounds familiar. He mastered the technique of being a patient listener and then giving answers without any bias. The only time he screened questions was in October 2006 when he aired his show from the Philippines. His show was renamed Ghost to Ghost AM on Halloween 2006. He interviewed people from different walks of life: singers, writers, actors, DJs, comedians, scientists, ufologists, and paranormal investigators. In his illustrious career, he interviewed renowned personalities such as Willie Nelson, Mel Haggard, Greg Bear, Chris Carter, Dan Aykroyd, Casey Kasem, George Carling, Dr. Stephen Greer, Father Malachi Martin, Linda Moulton Howe, George Knapp, Bob Lazar, and John Lear, just to name a few. His shows were liked because they were relaxed while covering serious and current subjects. In October 1998, Bell announced his sudden retirement from his show Coast to Coast AM due to a threat to his family. He was off air for about 2 weeks and returned when the matter had been resolved. He went off air again in 2000 when his son was assaulted. He later returned to the show in February 2001, but did not want to talk about his personal life. The show was hosted by Mike Stiegel in his absence. In October 2002, he left the regular show and started hosting only weekend shows due to medical problems. In January 2003, Bell was replaced by George Noory as the weekday host of the show. Bell started a new show called Art Bell's Dark Matter on Sirius XM's Indie Talk channel in September 2013. The show ran for 6 weeks. In July 2015, he started the show Midnight in the Desert, which was available online via TuneIn. Art Bell died on April the 13th, surprisingly Friday the 13th, as it was then. So, bit of a weird one for that, or rather quite apt for Art Bell. Aged 82 at his home in Pahrump, Nevada. An autopsy was scheduled for the following days to determine the cause of his death. Bell had suffered from health problems in the previous years. He posted on his website in July 2016 that he'd been hospitalized for pneumonia and revealed at the time that he suffered from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. On Wednesday, August the 1st, 2018, the Las Vegas Review-Journal reported the Clark County Coroner's Office findings. The coroner's office stated that Bell died of an accidental overdose from a cocktail of prescription drugs. His most popular talk show was Coast to Coast AM, that was broadcast from the early 1970s. His show Midnight in the Desert was made available online via TuneIn. He also made appearances on several TV shows such as the series Millennium. He co-authored several books, including the bestsellers The Quickening, Today's Trends, Tomorrow's World, and The Edge, Man's Mysterious Past and Incredible Future. For awards and achievements, Art Bell was bestowed with the Snuff Candle Award by the Committee of Skeptical Inquiries, Council for Media Integrity in 1998. In August 2006, his name was inducted into the Nevada Broadcasters Association Hall of Fame. In 2008, he was inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame. In 2007, he was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by the trade publication Radio and Records in Los Angeles. He established a Guinness World Record by being on air for 116 hours and 15 minutes continuously on a solo show on KENI. He used the money raised from the event to relocate 130 Vietnamese orphans to the US, where they were adopted by American families. In 1996, he faced criticism for reporting that Comet Hale-Bopp was being trailed by a UFO. This rumor, spread by him, reportedly resulted in the mass suicide by the members of the Heaven's Gate cult. Although he refrained from openly expressing any political views, he was a supporter of gun rights and same-sex marriage. His all-time favourite song was Some Velvet Morning by Lee Hazelwood and Nancy Sinatra, which he often played on his show. While in the Philippines, he passed the Philippine Class A Amateur Radio Operator's Exam and was allotted the call sign 4F1 A, B.
Nice.
So to say he was an extraordinary person, is probably a bit of an understatement. I think he's changed a lot of stuff. People like myself, people like Jimmy Church, people like George Norrie. I mean, George Norrie has always said many, many times that, you know, even though he didn't get on with Art Bell, you know, Art Bell was the reason that he is where he is. So that's cool.
I wouldn't be in this stuff mostly if it wasn't for Art Bell.
But there is
Seriously.
a fantastic site out there, and it's called the Art Bell Archives, where you can listen to, I think, every single show. So we'll put a link to that at the bottom of the description page. But yeah, I mean, we've all had those early hour of the morning where you sat there, the lights are down, and just kind of listening to him. I mean, his voice was like velvet. It was like a velvet codpiece. It was just so smooth. And
It was lovely.
the way that he used to come back at some people was very articulate and just very awesome. Gosh, oh my.
And like when it was in the worst situations, like that episode with the devil, that guy's losing his mind.
Yeah.
And he's just like, oh, well, that's rather unfortunate. He's not. What I loved about him was he would never help people. He would love to help them now and then, but what happened is like they're talking, he's just like, oh, okay, and then he tries to change subjects, and that's what.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh my.
That's
class.
It was always funny.
The link is now in the description for the Art Bell Archives. It really is fantastic.
But I do miss him because, you know, like there was a couple of ones where I did have a little chuckle because
JC Webster. I'm going to get you, Art Bell.
and also that voice changer one.
Yeah, that was JC. You will listen. You will listen. You will listen.
No, that one where it
Oh,
goes,
the guy.
oh yeah,
Confidential. When he used to call in. So
he always had a voice changer.
have we got any Art Bell moments coming? Any Art Bell moments out there, folks? I mean, one of my favourites was the guy that phoned in that was flying over Area 51
Oh yeah,
in a light aircraft.
Yeah. Jeff just put, who was that Hawaiian guy that played Somewhere Over the Rainbow on the ukulele? He made that guy famous.
Somewhere.
Yeah, they also played that at my cousin's funeral. That one. Is Israel something, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
I think his name was Israel something.
John said he never knew what he thought about a guest. He was so professional.
Yeah.
And he loved JC calling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there were so many people that used to say that JC was a setup. It was a stitch up, and
I wasn't.
I watched so many, well, not watch, but I listened to so many different Art Bell things where he was like, "No, this guy is original," and it got me when I spoke to Jimmy Church about it, and Jimmy said that when he was on, I think it was Coast to Coast one evening, JC actually called in, and Jimmy Church got the JC treatment, and I thought that was kind of cool. That was kind of cool. I really like that, and I don't know whether or not it was also at the point where it was the magic age of radio as well, because I mean, so many people used to listen to radio, whereas now it's kind of everywhere. You have like so many different internet sites that you can listen to radio through. I mean, the one we always use is Paranormal Radio. If you've got Android, if you've got the app there,
No,
so I can show you.
I have just shared that out
Yeah.
because Tinette said she hadn't heard enough of Art Bell, and I put
you
that
have
out. There's Art Bell all day on there.
Yeah. Hang on a second.
Brandon has put, I phoned the Time Travelers line. It was on Midnight in the Desert.
Which one is it? Paranormal Radio.
Erik Stitt,
Yep.
my favourite Art Bell moment.
Please don't
the
show
Area
me new stuff.
51 caller in Blind Panic.
Right. So that was pretty. That's what the app looks like.
It's an alien with a headphone.
Can you see it clearly?
No.
Right.
Lift it up. Closer. That's
No.
right.
So you can download that free from the App Store. And when you're in there,
It
fires up.
fires up, and then it
There you
comes
go.
up.
Look at that. Art Bell all day.
Right, so what type of... We love this app. So we've got Art Bell all day, Dark Matter, KGRA, Fade to Black,
We got all this stuff.
Fringe FM.
more Art Bell, the Ultimate Art Bell, the Fringe FM, WCET, which is awesome, and one of my new favorites, Paranormal UK Radio. But seriously, folks, there's so many on there. It just keeps going.
It'd probably like take you a month to get through them.
But yeah, you've always got something there. But say, you know, the things that you listen to, they never get old. I mean, one of my favorites was where he had John Lear on and he had to go through the John Lear test. That was quite thought provoking, especially when they kind of delved into the 9/11 thing as well.
I wish he's still alive.
Did I just see Pac-Man Reflection? Have you got Pac-Man on there or something?
No. I miss him because if I had the chance, I would phone in. Because, like, I always told Daddy, can I phone in? Can I phone in? But I never had a story to tell. So what I did was, as soon as I had a story to tell, he was gone. I couldn't tell the story. And hearing the news that he passed, just when I said, oh, it feels like another generation has passed. It's gone. And, you know, you can't bring him back. Which...
The thing is, though, is left such an amazing amount of work.
Exactly. He's left, like, all his show. He's left all of that.
I mean, our good friends over at UFO Chronicles on Facebook and on YouTube, they have recently posted, they've done a 9-hour Art Bell special.
Which we watch,
we're slowly making our way through it. That's the beauty of YouTube. You can cut it off and then go back where you left it. They've done, I think, a 4-hour UFO special. And there's another guy we watch on YouTube, and his name's Dave King, and he's just restarted uploading Art Bell content. The recent one that he'd done, I think, was it yesterday or was it this morning? It came out, and it was about an hour and 30 odd minutes long, and it was all aliens.
But this guy is brilliant. Me and
So,
Dad love...
looking at that, there is actually 3 separate apps just of Art Bell. There you go. You can see that. There we go.
Forgot what I was going to say now.
I know you killed the moment there.
Sorry.
You do that a lot. We lost a generation. So yeah, so you know, the thing is it'll live on. It'll always be part of this show anyway.
Well, I hope none of his like stuff gets deleted, because if it does, it's not going to be good, because
I'll say hopefully, as long as the Art Bell archive keeps running, none of that stuff will actually be lost.
But what is thing is, there wouldn't be no such thing as Fade to Black, nothing like that, without Art Bell.
That's it.
Because he created, what is it called?
Coast to Coast.
Coast to Coast and all of that. If it wasn't for him, and he never, there'd no pretty much thing be called of a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many. Every one of us, every one of us out there that talk about the fringe subjects, that have all these people on, people like us, people like maybe Mysterious Forces, people like maybe Explaining Esoterica, maybe, you know, all of these other people around us that do all these different shows that have all of these guests on, like us this evening, Ufology.
So
You
what
know,
we're trying to
last week
say
was
is,
paranormal. We're all influenced
Yeah,
in one way
we
or
are.
another. God, you know, Art Bell was the godfather of what we do, 100%.
Mm.
Yeah,
So what we're
Anything
trying to
else?
say is we love Art Bell.
no, nothing else. Right, okay, so if that's it then, my darlings,
It's a very sad goodbye from me.
It's a good night for me.
so a year's gone. Love, respect, much peace to Mr. Art Bell. And
We love you, Art Bell.
thank you for joining us tonight. We love you all, and we'll see you next week with the beginner's guide to the Anunnaki with the one, the only Ray Davis.
Au revoir.
Peace and love. Mwah.